Hey everyone, welcome to our weekly happy hour. Ed Espinosa, Diana Gomez, Wesley Story, thanks as always for being here to share your wisdom. As you know, everyone, we always do an icebreaker at the top. And I was going to ask how we all felt about the cold weather, but that was too on the nose to be an icebreaker, so we have something different. For those of you who don't know, today is Lunar New Year, and we are in the year of the ox, I believe. Ed, Diana, Wesley, do you know what your zodiac signs are, and how do you feel about your animal? Dan, you want to go first?
Yeah, I just found out what my animal was 30 seconds ago. The feeling I've had the past 30 seconds, it's a snake. I'm terrified of them. I respect them. I think keeping a good social distance from them, pandemic or not, sounds great.
Yeah, well, at least you're not Year of the Rat, which is what mine is, or mine was, or whatever the correct tense here is.
Snakes eat rats?
Snakes eat rats. That's right. It's I don't know what to make of it. I don't know why it is. I also looked it up just now. Not too wild that.
Rats are really smart though, Ed. They're really intelligent.
Yeah.
I got that going for them. Hopefully I can have an intellectual conversation with one over a slice of pizza.
I also just found out mine. We were like last minute scrambling because I was like, wait, I don't know mine. Apparently I'm an ox. So apparently it's my year, which is awesome. I didn't know that, but
I'm also a snake, but unlike Dan, I kind of dig it because when I was younger, I wanted to be a paleontologist, and dinosaurs are reptile-esque. So I was like, oh, these are freaking cool. Though my parents never let me buy a snake, and neither will my wife. So I guess I'll have to do. That's all I got. Speaking of an ox, if you know about oxes, they're kind of strong, but they can also be very stubborn. Kind of like Republicans during this impeachment trial. It started this week, and it's been pretty crazy. Ed, you shared some of the really cool, or not cool, shocking and horrifying new evidence the Democrats put out this week. What's going on with this trial?
Yeah. So the second impeachment trial. Let's clarify. Trump's already been impeached, right? So like what's happening now is the House impeached him. Now it's in the Senate to see if he gets convicted, and if he gets convicted, that would then trigger votes to bar him from running for federal office again. I believe on the first conviction, it means that he wouldn't the presidents get paid for the rest of their lives. I don't think he would get paid anymore. I'm not even sure what other benefits come with that, but I think he would lose those too. But a lot of this comes down to principle, right? Like there was an attack on the Capitol on January 6th. It was fueled by the president's rhetoric, and there has to be some consequence for that. And a lot of the footage they showed was about this. But the bigger thing here is that Republicans keep saying that impeachment is not the way to unity. But they never really say what is the way to unity. Okay, well, if we're not going to hold accountable for that, then what do we do? And their answer is always like, the shrug emoji, that's kind of what they're just like in a constant state of shrug emojis. Anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree, Ed. It's just like, one, what is the way to unity if we're not going to hold people accountable? But then also, if you don't consider this an impeachable offense, then like what would be an impeachable offense? Like at this point, you're basically saying that a president can get away with really whatever you want them to get away with.
Yeah.
I also want to give a shout out because the arguments this week from the House impeachment managers have been incredible. I think that specifically Joaquin Castro from Texas, he represented our state really well. And then also, if you didn't, at the beginning of the week, Representative Jamie Raskin, he actually opened up the impeachment trial with basically the opening argument against Trump. It was really emotional, and his speech, I think, really resonated with a lot of folks. He's experienced some hardship over the last few months because he lost a son, and then he had children there with him whenever this all took place. And so I think it was an especially scary moment. And I think that he really spoke truth to the seriousness of what happened on that day. But like you mentioned, the Democratic impeachment managers, they've used all kinds of video, security footage. Satvik was mentioning like the new evidence that came out, basically showing just how close a lot of stuff came to being. I mean, it was already horrible, but being even more horrible. Like we nearly lost members of Congress, to this attack. And some of the new evidence showed that. So I think there's this really clear line that they portrayed over the week, showing like the intent between Trump's actions and then the destruction that took place. And so I think we really need to give them credit. And then on the flip side of that, Trump's defense team has just been terrible so far with all of the arguments that they've been making. So I think it's very clear, which side is winning, even though they might not get the votes. And that's purely because of political reasons.
Yeah, I think the two big parts of this week with the impeachment trial have been rewatching and sort of like reliving that day of January 6th. And the defense team, like you said, has done a really great job of putting together video, especially showing that timeline of the sequence of events of that day with Trump's tweets, essentially proving their case. It was so impactful. And I don't understand how the decision to impeach and convict couldn't have been made just after watching that video. The other part that I think was really impactful this week was the legal team. I mean, this week we had a cat attorney from Texas who was trying to convince you that he's not a cat. And then we have Trump's defense team that's trying to convince you that he's an attorney. And it's wild. None of it makes sense.
My favorite part of the impeachment, I mean, getting to know Stacey Plaskett, the delegate from the Virgin Islands, coming out there in that blue suit, making that case, quoting "Run the Jewels" in her floor speech. That you don't see that happen too often, right? There's a lot of unprecedented things, but if the unprecedented things that we're seeing in Congress are members quoting "Run the Jewels," I'll take it. That's one that's actually a good precedent to break.
I agree with you, Ed. She was badass. And something to keep in mind is that, she doesn't even get a vote. So she wasn't able to vote to impeach Trump, but she came and completely delivered with her arguments. And so I think if he ends up getting convicted, she's a huge part of that in the U.S. Virgin Islands, their representation. And I think that's really awesome because they typically don't get a vote and they typically don't get that much power in Congress.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to see the delegates get highlighted. And there's like 7, I think it's like DC, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam. I'm missing. We have like 7 territories, so I think there's 7 delegates. But good to see them highlighted. Some of the other points, if you guys are, if anyone watching this is on the Progress Texas email list on Monday, on Wednesday, we sent out in our Wednesday content email 5 items on the impeachment. The first is that this is not the first time a former official has been up for impeachment. It's happened several times in the past. The words that Trump said, not just on January 6th, but the days leading up to it. And the fact that there is no January exception. Just because somebody has bad behavior their last month in office doesn't mean they're exempt, that there's any exception for accountability. It's actually, you would say the accountability is more important that last month in office to sort of secure their performance under that job agreement, right? So, there's one of these people have heard us say many times is that this attack will be in the history books. How we respond to it will also be in the history books. And if Republicans aren't going to vote to convict, that's one thing. It doesn't mean that the nation should not pursue some accountability. Let it be on those Republicans who refuse to convict. But this is an important point in our nation right now. We should be talking about this. The Senate should be taking this up.
I don't know if y'all saw it, but whatever happens with impeachment, I think it's in Georgia that they might press criminal charges against Trump for interfering in the election down there.
Yeah.
So, hopefully one or the other, we get to hold this guy accountable. Because, if the standard is set that like a president can do something really, really terrible in the last week of office, then, every criminal will become president and do good things for 4 years and then do whatever the hell they want at the end and be like, hey, I'm not president anymore. You can't hold me accountable.
Yeah. Can I mention another positive note about impeachment? Yeah. I know it's hard to say that, but another positive note here is that Trump's not on Twitter. And so he's sitting at home watching all this stuff and has no way to respond to it. And he's probably just like twisted in knots over not being able to do it. And That alone, I think, is some form of retribution to all this. You know how much he wants to fire off those tweets right now.
I read
It's
that
really
he's
satisfying feeling.
I saw a tweet that he's like writing tweets down because he can't. He's like, he needs that outlet. It's his therapy. And luckily, we don't have to be part of his therapy session anymore, which is
He's gonna like group chat it to people.
Melania. Did you see this? Did you see this, Melania? He's like, yes, Donald, I got it.
Probably has them on an Excel spreadsheet.
I don't know if you can use Excel.
I don't think so. Yeah. Post-it notes everywhere. So I know that the Republicans have started their defense today, or their counter to this, and some of the first videos I didn't watch. It started like an hour and a half ago. I haven't had a chance to see it. There's like grainy videos. There's a lot of Maxine Waters in there. I don't know why, but it's basically like an attack. Basically, campaign ads being run on the floor of the Senate to try to defend the president. Wesley, Diana, did you guys see any of these? Because I didn't catch it. I just heard that's what's going on right now. My text messages have been blowing up.
So I haven't watched too much of it, but I have read up on kind of the argument that they're using. So the original argument that they were using was first that, it's unconstitutional to convict a former president or whatever in the Senate, to impeach him. And we all know that didn't work because they immediately voted, the Senate voted to go through with the trial. And so they immediately lost that defense. And that was a bipartisan vote. There were Republicans that voted to move forward with the trial as well. And so now the defense team is using the argument that Trump was exercising his First Amendment right. And apparently they think that it's Trump's First Amendment right to incite violence against the government of the United States. I didn't read that in the Constitution. I don't know if y'all read that in the Constitution, but it's not his constitutional right to incite violence. I also think one thing that's important to point out is that yesterday night, or I don't know when it was exactly, but the Trump's defense team actually met with Senators Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, and Mike Lee. These are members of the Senate who are supposed to be impartial jurors in this trial. Sorry, my words got slurred there. They're supposed to be impartial jurors in this trial. So it's clear that his defense team, they're being aided by Republican senators who are really just trying to do damage control and want to try to clear Trump's name. And so I think that says a lot about what the trial is working with, and kind of how, the Republican senators who have already said that they're going to vote against impeachment, they've already made up their minds. They're not paying attention to the evidence. They're not doing what they're supposed to do as jurors witnessing this trial. And so I think that we need to know that moving forward, and so the results don't surprise us. But also keep in mind, as you mentioned before, Ed, we have to do something. There has to be accountability.
Yeah. Otherwise, what's to keep it from happening again?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So right now, if you're just joining us, you know that impeachment is sucking up a lot of oxygen over in DC. There's also a lot of really important stuff happening right here in Texas. The Texas legislative session has begun. Bills are being filed, and people have an opportunity to talk about why their progressive values are so important. Diana, you've been doing a lot of the work around our advocacy in leg session. Do you want to talk through some of, what are the big bills that progressives can be really excited about?
Yeah, I think, as I'd mentioned before, there is an amazing bill that was introduced by a lot of abortion funds in Texas, working with Representatives Cheryl Cole and Sarah Eckhart. And they have introduced Rosie's Law, which is an amazing law that had been introduced before, and they're pushing it again. The funds are Lilith Fund, Texas Equal Access Fund, and Frontera Fund. And the aim of this law is to restore insurance coverage of abortion for Texans enrolled in Medicaid, and for those who have private health insurance, because currently abortion coverage isn't covered by that. And that's why these abortion funds exist. I know we have a lot of restrictive abortion laws, but we have Roe versus Wade. Folks have the right to get an abortion. And this is just one way to ensure that folks have access to that abortion, which is a key part of it. And so, really want to put that to the forefront and let people know about that amazing legislation that's put forth. And if you want to support that, legislation and get updates on how to contact your representatives and let them know that you support it. You can go to the Rosie's Law website, which we will share in a minute, to be able to sign up for alerts and to take action.
Yeah, and I'll share that in just a minute. We actually have a question from Facebook, and Wesley is our expert on this. So it's great that he's here. Sean wants to know, what's happening with redistricting?
Okay, awesome. So I can talk about that. I was like, oh gosh, is this going to be something I'm not going to know the answer to? But I can talk about redistricting.
I can ask you your zodiac sign again.
Exactly. Okay, so redistricting is huge this session. And I guess if you're asking about it, you probably realize that. But just for everyone else, so I can give a little bit of context, this is a redistricting year, which means that our legislators are going to be redrawing legislative and congressional district maps. And these maps basically decide the populations that vote for certain representatives in Congress and for the Texas House and the Texas Senate. And so they're super important. And the way it's worked in the past is Republicans in Texas have gerrymandered these districts so that they get more representation. One thing we like to say here at Progress Texas is that voters should decide their politicians. It shouldn't be the other way around. Politicians shouldn't be deciding who their voters are. But unfortunately, through redistricting, sometimes they're able to do that. And so this session is extremely important because redistricting is happening. And over the past couple of weeks, there have actually been redistricting hearings in the Texas Senate where folks can testify virtually. There's one actually today. They're based off of regions. So there's one today for Houston. There's another one on the 19th for El Paso. And then there's another on February 26th for Austin. There's also a statewide hearing. So this is all of the regions of Texas. And that's on February 27th. And it starts at 9 a.m. We have a link that Satvik can post in the comments on Facebook. And it gives you information on how you can sign up to testify. But I think it's so important that people get involved and really encourage our lawmakers that we need a fair and equitable redistricting process so that all Texans are able to participate in the democratic process fairly. And one other thing that I'll add just as a little bit of news that's been happening is last week, there were announcements for who's going to be on committees and who's going to chair those committees. And unfortunately, there were some kind of annoying announcements. So Briscoe Cain is going to be chairing the House Elections Committee, and he's filed some of the worst, most suppressive election bills so far in this session. He was also part of the defense team or whatever that went to, I think, Pennsylvania to try to argue against the results of the election. So he's just not the kind of person you want on the elections committee deciding the kind of bills that get passed. And then also for the redistricting committee, Representative Todd Hunter, who's another Republican legislator with a really shameful history on voting rights, he was named chair of the redistricting committee as well. And he actually in the past, I think during the last redistricting process in Texas, the federal court found that he specifically racially gerrymandered the districts. So he's already been found by the court to have done something he shouldn't have done when it comes to redistricting, yet he was put in charge of this committee. So this just goes to show that it's so important that people are showing up so that we have, we hold these people accountable who are running this legislative process and who are deciding what bills get passed.
And the thing is, okay, so let's talk about what the court said a couple years ago. They said that Republicans intentionally discriminated. That's the phrase they used. And I think that phrase was used, I believe it was 9 different court rulings that used the phrase intentional discrimination. So that's one point. The other point I want to make is Briscoe Cain, Todd Hunter. Don't these sound like Texans that would be named in like a Coen Brothers film or something like that? Like your prototypical Texas bad guy from the legislature, Briscoe Cain, Todd Hunter. These are like, where do they find these guys?
Yeah.
Well, this is a good job
in Houston.
He did a good job on Briscoe because he doesn't look very intimidating. Like as far as like bad guys go, he's like mini me.
Yeah.
I think he tries to balance that out with gigantic cowboy hats that he wears, and it's very costume. Another really great thing that happened this week in terms of also talking about our progressive champions at the Ledge was that we had a new caucus announced. It is the Texas Caucus on Climate, Environment, and Energy Industry. Brand new, chaired by Representative Aaron Zwiener, who has always been a champion for the environment. And it's really great to see a caucus created that is really trying to tackle climate change, not just climate change, but the effects it has on Texans and the disproportionate effect that it has on marginalized populations. To have legislators, politicians who believe in science, that's amazing.
I agree.
If I can add one thing on this caucus, Texas is already one of the leading states in green energy, renewable energies. And it makes no sense that the GOP is fighting so hard to stop that. So seeing Democrats taking a step forward to promote our leadership in technology, our leadership in green energy, it means that they're steering our economy in the right direction for decades to come. It's a no-brainer to do this.
Yeah, and it's a good point because what Republicans will inevitably say, and I shouldn't even just say Republicans because I think there are some that are coming around on the issue, but maybe some of the far right and the conservatives are saying that green energy is a threat to energy jobs, but it's not really the case. The case is that if you're in energy, you want to go where the industry is going. You want to be ahead of the curve. You don't want to be left behind. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, we've got anyone who's driven through Abilene or parts of North and West Texas has seen the windmill farms that are out there. I can look out my window right now and see a couple of houses that are just covered with solar panels right now. The future is headed towards renewables. Tesla is one of the most fastest growing car companies in America, and they're all based on electric. So, it's a good thing for Texans to be in that conversation, to be part of that, because if we've been leading on energy for so long, we want to continue to lead on energy, even as it moves to these new renewable sectors.
Yeah.
Completely agree, Ed. And I think it's funny because Greg Abbott likes to brag about when people like Elon Musk move their companies to Texas. Just quick shout out that typically that's to Austin, which he completely always tries to rail against, but then he also is happy when people move to Texas because they're coming to move to Austin. But anyway, he likes to use that as kind of a bragging rights thing about, Texas's economy is so great. But then when it comes to green jobs and green energy, he's against that. And it really just doesn't make sense because that's what's bringing these people to our state is the potential for that industry to really grow. Also, one thing I'll point out is that since 2014, we've been consistently losing oil and gas jobs in the state. The oil and gas jobs have been going down every year. And so I think that it's important for people to recognize that, and that experts within the industry have pointed out that we need to shift to green energy because that's where this industry is headed. And if we want to actually survive, if Texas as a state wants to survive and our economy keep strong, that's where we need to go.
Yeah. So I have a question, I guess for Diana and Wesley, since you work in the Ledge a lot. So we've just told all Texans all these great things that are happening. You have Rosie's Law, Climate Change Caucus, redistricting that they can testify for. But we are in a pandemic. So how can they get involved with this kind of stuff? What can Texans do?
Yeah, we have actually a really great blog that one of our legislative fellows has written, Abby. It's on different ways to make your voice heard during the Texas legislative session. And especially for a lot of folks that want to keep safety in mind or might not be able to travel to the Capitol, it's really important to still keep in mind that even pre-pandemic and right now, folks can still call up the representatives and email them about their concerns, and even call and email them about the things that they want to champion, like Rosie's Law, like folks from that new environmental caucus to learn more about, how to support them. And learn more about those laws that they'll be championing and introducing during this legislative session as well. And then also, everyone knows about Zoom and different video calls and options. You can always make an appointment with your different representatives to talk virtual face-to-face with a legislative staffer and keep that connection that way.
Yeah, definitely. I would say check that blog out. I think that Abby goes over 4 different ways to get involved. So one of them, she talks about how to keep up with legislation, which is kind of really difficult if you're not familiar with the legislative process. And so she kind of walks you through that. She also talks about, like Diana mentioned, she has information in it on how to call and how to email your representatives. She also has details on how to testify. You know, testifying is going to look a little bit different this year. And so in some cases, you might be able to testify virtually. In other cases, you might only be able to testify in person, but she has more details on that. And then she also talks about how to get involved with different organizations who are advocating for the issues that you care about. So whether it's signing their petitions or making calls for them, or even donating to your favorite orgs, there are a lot of different ways to get involved. And I think especially this year, because of COVID, like Diana mentioned, everything we do, we're gonna have to be creative about it because we're not able to do a lot of the typical actions that we used to do, like rallying and protesting and testifying in person. So digital organizing is going to be especially key. And to be able to keep up with that digital organizing, you need to be involved. You need to see what organizations like Progress Texas and our partners are working on so that you can also take part in that process.
Yeah, our partners like the Workers' Defense Project or the Texas Freedom Network or Texas Civil Rights Project. There's so many out there. We actually have a blog where we listed all of them. But a couple things on digital organizing. A lot of people wonder, like, when I sign a petition, does it mean anything? Does it go anywhere? And yes, it does. When you sign a petition at Progress Texas, it actually generates a letter that goes to your elected official. It's an email, but it still goes to the elected official, and it tells them what you think. And a lot of these legislators, especially those who agree with you, like seeing that you've got their back, that there's some cover out there. It gives them a little bit more resilience to dig in their heels on some issues when they're going into negotiating processes. Now, obviously, we want them to work out what they can get, but it helps to let them know where you're coming from. And so that digital work all makes a big difference.
So we just got a comment from Twitter saying, pointing out that all of us are wearing black.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering, like, is there something that we're mourning or grieving, or like we didn't plan this? It just kind of happened on its own.
I own 2 black shirts. This one, my Humans Against Ted Cruz shirt, and I never wear either of them. And I happened to put it on today. I'm wearing a shirt from a Blondie concert. Like that's that's what's going on here, and I never wear it. I've lost a little bit of weight since the beginning of the year, so I put it on, and then here we all are in the dead of winter.
So for me, it's the opposite. I've gained some weight since the pandemic, and I know black is slimming. And that was my reason.
See, my reason is like not actually thoughtful at all. I literally just like haven't done laundry in a little bit. So I also usually just like throughout the day, because we're work from home now, I just wear like shorts and a t-shirt. I'm not super fancy. So I just like looked through my clean laundry and was like, oh, this like turtleneck is clean and available. So I threw it on.
You wear it well.
Thank you.
I do. And I was pet sitting for some friends, and their dog hair is everywhere. So I wore no black because, as like the hair, pops out. So I just came home this morning. I said, you know what? I haven't worn black in a while. And we're going to do a happy hour, and people should always remember the and there's a lot that happen to make, so you got to do it. This has been really insightful, really amazing. Diana, Ed, Wesley, thank you so much for your insights. Audience, thanks for always being here with us and giving your amazing comments and questions. If you liked today's conversation, we invite you to keep up with Progress Texas every day. Visit us at progresstexas.org, where you can subscribe for our email updates, as well as find links to all of our social media pages. Thanks a lot. Have an amazing weekend. Have a good one.
I am not
Bye.
that.